Meet ORIA, the world's first immersive audio interface and monitor controller. In this video, we're going to show you how to get started and cover the basics of using ORIA in your workflow, whether you're using it on its own or as a monitor controller in a more complex configuration. Firstly, we're going to download the drivers for ORIA from the Audient website. The link is down in the description and can also be found by going to audient.com and finding ORIA in the menu under Products and Monitor Controllers, and then going to the Download section found in the sub-menu. Make sure to select the driver that matches your OS. ORIA supports both Mac and Windows. We highly recommend you download the drivers even when using ORIA as a monitor controller. It's worth noting, in order to access all of ORIA's immersive monitor control, ORIA needs to be connected to a computer via USB. Double-click on the install icon and follow the instructions to get the software installed. Next, once the software is installed, open the ORIA software, power on ORIA, and plug in the USB cable. At this point, a dialog box may pop up recommending that you update the firmware to the latest version. We highly recommend that you do so, as there may be new features. Simply follow the instructions on screen as seen here. The process takes a couple of minutes, and once updated, the ORIA software will initialize and the controls will become available. Now follow the on-screen setup process. You will be asked to set your desired brightness settings using a control wheel. The brightness control affects how bright ORIA's hardware LEDs are. Next, you will be prompted to select your desired function button setting. Choose the function you desire and select Finish. Setup is now complete. Before we start using ORIA, now is a good time to plug in the rest of the cables and get ORIA installed in place. The surround outputs can either be connected via TRS or AES outputs, depending on your preference. If you are using the TRS surround output connections, your analog speakers are connected via TRS jacks. The same applies to both dedicated stereo outputs. Connect the speakers, matching each speaker position to its designated output connection found on the rear of ORIA. If you're using a setup such as 7.1.4, which doesn't use every connection, you will notice that there are some gaps in the speaker layout to match the Dolby Atmos standards. As in this example, you wouldn't be using wide speakers or central height speakers. If you're using the AES outputs, be aware that our setup uses 8 male XLR outputs on the same DB25 loom to provide 16 outputs, which is different from the usual AES specifications. We will cover how to configure custom AES routing in the software overview video, linked down in the description. If you are planning to use ORIA as a monitor controller, taking source signal from an external interface via ADAT, plug this in now using the ADAT inputs. However, if you are using ORIA as an all-in-one interface and would like to use the ADAT inputs for adding external preamps, connect these now via the ADAT inputs. If using multiple pieces of digital equipment, to ensure your clocking is stable, we recommend using word clock over BNC, so connect the word clock cables now. At this point, ensure ORIA is powered on and power on your speakers. Open up the ORIA software app. We will cover this in more detail later, but the first thing we need to do is select our input source and outputs. Look at the monitoring panel found in the top left of the ORIA software. This is where we choose the input source. If using ORIA standalone as a USB interface, taking the audio source directly from the computer, select USB. If using ORIA as an external monitor controller via the ADAT inputs, select the ADAT option from the drop-down menu. In the monitoring panel, you will also find the master output volume control. We can turn up the volume with the volume control here, or with the control wheel on the front of the unit. Be careful not to turn this up too high before testing for audio signals. If you are using ORIA in a monitor controller configuration, it will also be necessary at this point to open up the System tab at the top right of the software and find the Preferred Clock Source section, and change this to either ADAT or word clock depending on your preferred setup, as the clock will likely be determined by your master interface. Now we have our inputs and outputs connected, we recommend testing your system's outputs to ensure everything is connected correctly. There are several ways to generate test signals. One way we recommend is using a DAW. You can use a signal source as test material, such as an oscillator or a noise sample. In this example, we're going to use Pro Tools and generate the signal via its oscillator. If you are more familiar with another DAW, this process will work in any modern DAW. With a new project in Pro Tools, we have to go to the Setup menu and Playback Engine and make sure that Audient ORIA is set as the playback engine and hit OK here. Next, for our testing, we will make mono buses in our I/O section for each one of our outputs. This is just for testing purposes and may not be needed later on. Let's go to the Setup menu and I/O, and in the Output section at the top tab, we can add new paths with the New Path button here. Create 16 new mono outputs, add default channel assignments and auto-create related bus paths. Let's hit Create. And we can select all of these with Shift and click and drag them along so that they are all defined using the outputs 1 to 16 from ORIA. We can also delete all of the other paths out of the output if we are testing. If you already have enough paths in your Pro Tools I/O to be testing all 16 outputs, then do so as your setup requires. Firstly, create a new audio track and load the oscillator into the Insert Effects section, which is under Multi-Mono Plugin, Other, Signal Generator. And then we will change the output of this oscillator track to be mono using output 1 mono. In this case, we can hear a sine wave being generated by the signal generator. I could change this to a noise sample. And if I turn up the master volume on ORIA, in the case of the surround outputs, this should generate audio via the front left speaker. And if everything is working correctly, then you should hear sound from the front left. Now, repeat this process methodically. If you change the output of the oscillator track from output 1 to output 2, this should change the output to the audio to the front right channel. Both on the metering in the ORIA software and from our front right speaker. Repeat this process for each output in turn, checking that the level appears correctly in the ORIA software and comes from the correct speaker. If you are using ORIA in a monitor controller configuration, keep in mind that the channel numbers in your DAW may be offset. As an example, here I have an ID44 as an external main interface, and we can see that the first 8 outputs are the ID44's analog outputs. Then the optical outputs are designated following that. In this example, ORIA's first output channel is routed from channel 9 on the ID44, and we can see here in Pro Tools that this output, output 9, is labeled as matching with ADAT1. Make a note of the channel number configuration, as when we're setting up the Dolby Atmos renderer, we will need to know the channel layout for the renderer's speaker assignments. Once your channel outputs are tested, we recommend setting up your Dolby Atmos renderer for use when mixing immersive audio. In this video, we will firstly focus on the standalone Dolby Atmos renderer and connecting it to ORIA in a single computer setup, and in this case on Mac. Firstly, change the audio engine in Pro Tools to be Dolby Audio Bridge. This will send audio either as a bed channel or an object, depending on your working method. For the purposes of testing audio, set the oscillator to channel 1. Leave Pro Tools open in the background. Open the Dolby Audio renderer and open its Preferences menu. Select Dolby Audio Bridge as the audio input device and select ORIA as the audio output device, unless using ORIA as a monitor controller, in which case select your main interface here. At the bottom of this setup page, make sure speaker outputs are on, then close the preferences by pressing accept. Then we're going to setup and room setup in the top menu bar. From here, define the speaker setup that you are using. By default, the layout for 9.1.6 is lit up. By clicking on the speakers that you are not using, you can set the renderer to match your speaker configuration. For example, if I were to deselect the wide speakers and the top mid speakers, this would now reflect a 7.1.4 setup. Go to the routing tab at the top of this window, and you can see the speaker number definitions, which should match the corresponding outputs on ORIA. If in the monitor controller configuration, change these numbers to reflect the chosen output channels on your master interface as noted in the previous section. Click Accept. Go to File, New Master File, and make a test file. Press OK. From here, the monitoring path should be set to physical, and the input master switch should be set to input. Switch back to Pro Tools and now test the oscillator through channels 1 and 2. By default, the Dolby renderer has a bed of 7.1.2, so test the first 10 output channels in Pro Tools to test the respective channels in the Dolby renderer. So we can change those here and confirm that these are outputting audio in the correct places in the audio field. In Pro Tools, it may be also necessary to create output buses in the bus selection of the I/O window if you need to see the additional outputs in this method. Additionally, we can now connect ORIA's downmix functionality to the Dolby Audio renderer. To do this, with the Dolby Audio renderer open the ORIA Desktop Software and open the System tab at the top right. In here, select the Renderer tab. The Dolby Atmos renderer should be selected, and in the target drop-down menu, select the local renderer, which should match your computer name, which should now appear in this menu. By closing the System menu, we can now see at the top right of the ORIA Desktop Software that the renderer status is now shown. Press the downmix button on the ORIA front panel to test cycling through this function. In our second example, we will use the internal Dolby Atmos renderer in Pro Tools. This process works for both Mac OS and Windows. Firstly, open Pro Tools and open a new session. Once this is open, go to the Setup menu and select Playback Engine, and make sure ORIA is selected as the playback device. Press Yes. Next, we need to set up ORIA to make Pro Tools aware that you have immersive audio output channels. Open the Setup menu after pressing OK. Open up the Setup menu and select I/O. In the Output tab of the I/O panel, we can see that by default, Pro Tools has defined all of ORIA's outputs, and in this case, we need a single immersive audio output instead. Shift and click all of these outputs from 1 down to 16, and then press the Delete Path button. Now, we need to define a multi-channel output. Press the New Path button to create one new path. We can see its name in this box. I'm going to name that Atmos. And here is where you select the number of output speakers and layouts that you have. For example, 9.1.6 or 7.1.4. If you are using a 9.1.6 setup, this, when we hit Create, will have automatically assigned the speaker outputs in the order as labelled on the rear of the ORIA hardware, although the lettering standard in Pro Tools is slightly different. If you are using another layout, such as 7.1.4, be aware that Pro Tools by default will have a mismatch between its default output routing and ORIA's connections. To correct this, move the speaker routing icons to match the connections on the ORIA hardware by dragging and dropping the icons into the correct slots. Once this is done, at the bottom right of this window, change the monitor path and audition path to be the new Atmos path. At the top of this I/O setup window, there is a Dolby Atmos tab. Select this and enable the Dolby Atmos tick button at the top of the page and ensure that internal renderer is selected in the drop-down menu next to this button. If your window here is not populated with a list of objects, press the default button at the bottom here with Create Stereo Objects selected in the drop-down menu next to it. Close the I/O window and create a new track with one mono output. In the Insert Effects section, add the sound generator effect from the Other plugin menu. This will output across the front stereo pair of the Atmos bed by default, and we can change this to be an object so we can test all of our speaker outputs. For this example, change the object selection here to be object and object 11, as this is the first object available to us. Below where the object was selected is the button that says bus. If we click this, that changes to object. Now that this track is selected as an object, we can look at the output selection in the mix window here. There is a small slider icon next to where it says Object 11. Click on this and it will open the immersive panner. At this point, open the Dolby Atmos renderer window, which can be found under the Window menu, and the Dolby Atmos renderer icon. Now we've opened the Dolby Atmos renderer, we need to select the monitoring at the top here and define which monitoring format we want to be listening in. I earlier selected 7.1.4 for my speaker setup, and so now I can select 7.1.4 from the monitoring here. Move the oscillator test tone track's positioning by looking at the immersive panner for that track and dragging the dot that represents the oscillator through the immersive field. There is a knob here to adjust the height to test your height speakers. Listen to ensure that the positioning of your object in the immersive panner matches the panning in the Dolby Atmos renderer, and also the metering in ORIA and the positioning of the audio in your speaker setup. On macOS, it is now possible to listen to Dolby Atmos content through streaming services such as Apple Music, which is great for referencing other mixes or simply enjoying immersive content on your system. However, be aware that this only works natively from macOS Ventura onwards. Let's take a look at how to set this up. Go to Applications, Utilities, and Audio MIDI Setup. In here, select ORIA, and from there, select the Configure Speakers option from the bottom right of the program. From the Configuration drop-down, select the Atmos configuration most suited to your setup. Please note that 7.1.4 is currently the maximum configuration supported by macOS at the time of making this video. Next, make sure the speaker labeling presented by the Audio MIDI utility app matches the correct speaker output presented by ORIA. You can press the test button for each speaker to test if your speaker routing is correct. For example, these are not correct for me. I need to change these to be LTF, RTF, LTR, and RTR. Once this is done and you're happy that your setup is correct, press Apply. Now this is set up, open Apple Music and play a Dolby Atmos supported track. You can quickly identify a Dolby Atmos supported track as a Dolby logo will be present. If you are not seeing any Dolby supported tracks, open Apple Music Settings, navigate to the Playback tab, and ensure that the Dolby Atmos drop-down is set to automatic. Now we have our speakers connected and channels tested, let's take a brief look at getting started with the ORIA Desktop Software. This segment is designed to give you a brief overview, however there is a more in-depth video on our YouTube channel. The link is in the description. At the top left of the ORIA software, you will find the monitoring panel. Here we can see input source and output selection. main output volume control alongside global dim and mute controls, mono and polarity. Moving over to the metering panel, we can see the output level metering, including pre and post. Pre shows us the audio levels straight from your DAW or the renderer, and post mode shows us audio levels after calibration processing and after master volume control. The metering panel can also be expanded, enabling you to use expanded metering window independently of the main software window. The expanded metering window provides you with an expanded view and more detail, allowing you to keep a closer eye on your metering. Next is the room panel. This is a visual representation of your speaker positions in the room, with each speaker being identified with a circular speaker icon, all positioned around the user as denoted by the white user icon found in the center of the section. You can use the speaker icon to both mute or solo that specific speaker. To mute a speaker, simply use a left click on the speaker icon to toggle mute on and off. To solo a speaker, use the shortcut Shift and left click on the speaker icon to solo or unsolo that speaker. To the left of the room panel, you will find the Groups panel. Here you can use the mute and solo buttons to quickly mute or solo entire groups of speakers. The height speakers, sides, front row, sub-channel, and the front stereo pair. Lastly, we have the Profiles panel. The Profiles panel is used to quickly switch between the calibration profiles you have created for your room and is organized into a list format. A total of 32 profiles can be stored on ORIA itself. It is worth noting that although profiles are stored directly on ORIA's hardware, they are controlled using the Profiles panel or the Profile button on the front of the unit. At the top of the panel, there are 4 favorite slots, and when using the dedicated Profiles button on the front of ORIA, a tap of the button will cycle through these 4 favorites. To create a new profile, click the plus button found in the top right of the Profiles panel. Name your profile and hit save. You are now ready to start entering calibration parameters. We have 2 separate videos that cover the calibration process itself, one which covers inputting manual room calibration, and a second video showcasing our SonarWorks Sound ID reference integration in depth, and those are linked down in the description. To summarize, you should now have the latest drivers installed, have ORIA updated to the latest firmware, have all the speakers and external devices plugged in and working, have the Dolby Atmos renderer and macOS Atmos playback up and running, and be familiar with the layout of the ORIA Desktop Software. If you would like to find out more, we also have more in-depth videos on our YouTube channel, giving you more detail on subjects such as profiles, speaker calibration, a deeper look into the software, and more. Links to those videos are in the description. For more details, please consult the ORIA manual, which is available to download on our site. We hope this has helped you get started on your journey into mixing immersive audio with ORIA. Hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more content on ORIA and all the latest Audient products. Thanks for watching, good luck, and have fun mixing immersive made easy.